In 1958, Hammer Films released their first in a long line of Dracula films, Count Dracula films, starring Christopher Lee as Dracula himself and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. This is a film I saw many times as a kid. What that may have done to my brain, I don't know. But I watch this now and I do find it bizarre that my parents did allow me to watch this as a kid. I mean, now it's tame, don't get me wrong. I watch this now and it's clearly very tame, you know, but even so, like by today's standards, it's rated like a 12. Although the Blu-ray is still rated a 15. So, yeah, you know, like I say, as a child, I would imagine this was probably quite a lot, but now not so much. For anyone coming to the Hammer horror for the first time, I would say, you know, don't come to it with modern expectations of what horror is. I think horror has sunken down a particular rabbit hole of gratuity that these films won't quite live up to if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for story and character, then you're going to find something here that I think might be quite rewarding. The opening of the film did kind of make me roll my eyes a few times. It kind of gives you the impression that maybe it's badly written, or there's a particular character, Jonathan Harker. So for anyone who's seen the Bram Stoker's Dracula, that's the character that was played by Keanu Reeves. Here, he doesn't quite get the story arc that character got, but we open the movie with him, and he's gone to Dracula's castle. He's on his way to Dracula's castle. He's there to become essentially Dracula's librarian. He's there to sort Dracula's library out. And there's a few things that happen within the first 10 minutes or so where you're kind of like, this guy's either really stupid or this is just bad writing. Like, for example, there's a woman that he comes across in Dracula's house, castle, I should say, who's literally asking for help. Please help me. I'm being held here against my will. And his reaction is essentially, oh, okay. And then he goes about his way and doesn't kind of mention it, and you're just like, really? That's doesn't really strike me as the kind of response that situation would require. Then moments after that, when he's shown to his room by the Count himself, he is locked in said room from the outside, and he kind of checks the handle, and then he just shrugs his shoulders and goes back to his business. Like, this is perfectly acceptable behaviour for a stranger to lock you into the room he's placed you in. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe this is just the way they made movies back in the 50s. And it's only like a few moments after this when there's a line of dialogue he delivers where we realise, actually, no, he's fully aware of what's going on. He's not there to be a librarian. He's there to end the reign of terror that has been instigated by Count Dracula. So yeah, he's there undercover, and it immediately makes you go, ah, okay. I like that. That was a nice touch. One thing that does hit me as a negative from the opening and then throughout the film is the music. And I know this is kind of just the way musical scores, particularly in horror movies of that period, were they're overly dramatic. They really spell things out. You can have two people doing something in a room that isn't necessarily that horrific or that tense, but the music just really tells us, look, this is how we're meant to feel right now. And it's a little bit over the top at times. It's a little bit grating on the nerves at times. Once we get past all this opening setup that really shows us who Count Dracula is and why he should really be stopped, we move then into like the second act with Van Helsing, a favourite of mine, Peter Cushing, playing Van Helsing. A lot of people really rate Christopher Lee, particularly in this film, particularly for his portrayal of Dracula. And I do like Christopher Lee quite a lot as Dracula. I'm not saying he's not good, but for me, the biggest draw was always Peter Cushing. I love what he brings to Van Helsing. He engenders a particular kind of trust. I always think of Picard in Star Trek Insurrection. There's a moment in that film when there's a character who literally tells him that you have no idea the amount of trust you engender, and it's just something about his personality. And I apply that to Peter Cushing with his portrayal of Van Helsing. It's just something about him that has a certain warmth and just engenders trust. He can tell you something without having any real evidence, and you believe it. In many ways, his character reminds me of Dr. Loomis in Halloween. Technically, it's the other way around, seeing as this came before. I see a lot of correlations in Dr. Loomis, just because a lot of his lines are exposition, and it requires a certain kind of actor who can deliver lines that are mostly exposition in such a way that it doesn't feel like exposition. That it builds up this world around us, that, you know, he's our way in, he's our eyes and ears, he's the one who tells us what we need to know, but does it in such a way that we don't feel like we're being told what we need to know. Something else I really like about Dracula is, and this isn't typical for me, I wouldn't normally gravitate to this form of villainy, so to speak, but what I like about it that separates it from the likes of other kind of Hammer horror movies or even Universal horror movies is that there's never any kind of sympathy towards Dracula. He is the one monster out of the canon that they have. You know, you think about Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, the Fishman, all of these monsters that were kind of created and kind of put on screen through Universal and then through Hammer, they usually have a sympathetic element to them. There's usually something about the monster that makes you feel for them in some way. You don't necessarily condone their actions, but you understand them. You want them to kind of come out the other side a changed person, or saved, so to speak. There's an element there where you're hoping for some form of salvation from them. You never get that with Dracula. Dracula is just out and out pure evil. He's, dare I say, one note in that regard, but not in a bad way. You know, I think some movie villains are very one note because they're just badly written. The trick with Dracula, or the hard thing to do if you're writing the character of Dracula, is how do you portray that one-note aspect of him, that he's essentially he's just evil? How do you portray that without seemingly being, you know, just one note in a badly written kind of way? And I think they do that here by keeping him off screen as much as possible and having, as I say, you know, Cushing's Van Helsing talk him up a bit and having his acolytes and the people that he's kind of manipulating play into the story more than him, so to speak. So he's always a presence that looms over everything that's going on, but he's never front and center in a way that allows you to notice or spot that, yeah, actually it's quite one note. But when he is on screen, obviously, as I say, you've got Christopher Lee bringing that charisma, bringing that seductive charm, and really making you buy into the fact that this is a creature of the night, an evil with singular purpose. You know exactly who to root for. That's the key. You know, you're never in doubt as to who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. You know who to root for. You want them to win, and it's just a very simple tale of good versus evil. I also like the fact that, and obviously this is because of my faith, I like the fact that it's the Christian symbols, iconography, so to speak, that destroys that evil. I like the acknowledgement of that this is a war between heaven and hell, essentially. Something that I feel has been stripped away from a lot of modern day horror films. We you know, when we deal with evil in a lot of modern day horror films, we want to be able to deal with the evil, but we want to leave God out of the equation. I, you know, personally as a man of faith, don't believe you can do that. So it's an element about these older Hammer films that I do like, is that when people are confronting evil, they do so with God. You know, that God is the one who's who's in the corner fighting it, and that's how evil is destroyed. I would have liked a little bit more in regards to the motivations behind Dracula's choices. So we have this opening with Harker, in which Harker has gone there to destroy him. His plan gets foiled, and, you know, spoiler for a film from 1958, but Harker is killed. Dracula takes him out. Harker doesn't manage to complete his plan, but that's really what kickstarts the rest of the story going forward. And when we go to Van Helsing, and he goes to see Harker's fiancée, it's like, okay, why is Dracula going specifically for her now? And we're given this, you know, he says it's revenge. It's revenge against a dead man. You know, this dead man, this Harker, he's not going to care at this point. He's dead. It just feels like Dracula's got to do an awful lot of travelling from his castle to a completely different town, village, goodness knows how many miles away, just to seek out this dead man's fiancée and then go for her. And it just, yeah. What I do like about the Francis Ford Coppola film, the 90s version, the Bram Stoker's Dracula, how much of it is actually Bram Stoker's Dracula, you can argue the case with. But I do like about that one is that they do give that motive of Dracula wanting to specifically single out Mina Harker, in that she reminds him of a long lost love. Now you can't do that here because we don't go into that level of history with Dracula, and that would then bring on the whole issue which I just talked about, which makes him a sympathetic character, and they don't want to do that here. But I would have liked, I think, a little bit more reason for him to specifically go out of his way to attack the rest of the family, to go after them. Now, I would have done something along the lines of Harker's letters being intercepted on their way to Mina Harker, and Dracula can't afford to take any chances. You know, maybe she knows, maybe the family knows, and maybe Jonathan Harker wasn't the only one who was going to come, so he's got to wipe them out in order to make sure. Just a little line about that in there would have been nice, rather than just, oh, it's revenge. Okay, so revenge against a dead man seems a bit pointless to me. Then you go after Van Helsing because revenge! There is also some very 50s British comedy, slapstick kind of stuff going on in this. Kind of feels more like it's out of a Carry On film, with this crossing guard guy. And it's like, yeah, there's a point when Van Helsing steams through the crossing guard gate, and Dracula does as well, and this guy's kind of left scratching his head, and you just, it's a little bit too, yeah, Carry On. We've been very serious and somber in tone throughout most of this film, and then we get this little character that just feels like he's in the wrong movie. Beyond that, though, they're minor quibbles for a film which is, over 60 years old. You have to put everything into context, and I think if I'd have watched this back in the day, I'd have been absolutely glued to the screen. Now, the copy that I watched is the 2012 Hammer reconstruction. So they found this lost footage from the film that was on a Japanese print, and they were able to clean it up, put it back into the film, and it was released on Blu-ray in 2012. And it does add a little bit more kind of gruesomeness towards the end. Like, particularly during Dracula's death scene, there's a moment that had previously been cut from all British and American versions, where as he's dying, he's clawing his own face, and that's pretty gnarly, and it's some pretty good special effects there, physical special effects, which still to me looks better than any kind of modern CGI. If you did that with CGI, it'd be like, okay, cool. There's just something about it that would just be off. Having that physical kind of makeup being pulled off as he's like tearing into his face, it just still looks good, still looks gnarly. I can see why they cut it way back when. As I say, quite tame by modern day standards, but back then you could probably see why it might have been a shocker. There's a couple more moments in it. A moment when Dracula is seducing this woman, and that one goes on a bit longer than the the version that I'd seen previously, not to any degree that would make you go, cover your eyes, kids. But yeah, again, like it shows you how times have changed. Like when this film was released way back when, even without this footage, it was an X certificate. You know, back in the good old glory days of the 50s. Yeah, I think that was like the highest certificate you could get. Well, there was triple X, wasn't there? Which was like porn and stuff. But yeah, as far as like movies that most people would want to go and watch at the cinema, X was pretty much your hard certificate, which is laughable now. Obviously, I think if this was released now, you'd be lucky to get a 12. But it just shows you how times have changed. It's scary, actually, in many ways. There's a couple of moments in here that today wouldn't wash with modern audiences, rather annoyingly, because actually, you know, if that's the way they would have done things back then that's the way you need to show it, because that's how times were. There's one moment, quite frankly, I think like she deserves it because she's such an idiot. There's this housekeeper character who specifically gets told to make sure the windows stay shut, don't remove the garlic, because that's what's protecting this girl. And the girl wakes up and she's like, oh, get this off me, open a window. So she does, and it's like...
And you've seen the result.
But Arthur, dear... Please, sir. Excuse me, sir. It was all my fault.
Are you an idiot? It's like... So yeah, Van Helsing, when this woman gets a bit hysterical and she's trying to say what's been going on, Van Helsing gives her a little slap.
You said I must come back to Madam, so I came up here, and he looked like the devil.
Now what happened?
Now, I don't condone slapping women, obviously, but what I am saying is back then this was acceptable. So if you are making a film set within this period, I think it would be perfectly acceptable to show something like that, because you're trying to be faithful to the time. You know, it's not like Enola Holmes, where these days, and don't get me wrong, I find Enola Holmes quite entertaining. I like it, but if you're going for, okay, how was it back then? How would have things been? Then Van Helsing slapping this woman across the face to calm her down, to shake her out of her hysteria, would not be out of keeping with the time. So yeah, that was an amusing moment. But like I say, I'm watching it and I was like, yeah, that wouldn't wash today. You wouldn't see that today. Context, context, context. And within that context, thinking of how old this film is and what it did, the lush sets, lovely cinematography, great lighting. You know, I love the use of colours in this. It sometimes could feel like it was by accident, but when you really pay attention to how the screen is divided up often into threes, so you got foreground, midground, background, and they make sure that the colour, there's a colour scheme there. From one scene to the next, Van Helsing can walk into a different room. He's had a change of clothes, but those clothes mesh with the colours of what's going on in the set. So I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of attention there paid to making this thing look beautiful. The use of the same set multiple times but dressing it differently, which I didn't notice until I watched the behind the scenes stuff. And then you go, oh, of course. That's the way they got around financial difficulties. You know, we don't want to shed loads of money on this thing. We need to come in under a certain budget, and they do by redressing sets. And it works because the people who are behind the scenes doing the craft are very good at it. So I really like Dracula. I think it's a really good kick-off to what is essentially a franchise within this world of Hammer. And yeah, looking forward to the next one, Brides of Dracula. I have reviewed 3 of these movies, I think, already. I think I reviewed Scars of Dracula, I've reviewed Dracula AD 1972, and I reviewed the last one, Satanic Rites of Dracula. So I've just got a few more left that I've done them all arse end up. I ended up reviewing them just because I'd watched them at the time and fancied reviewing it. Those reviews are out there on my channel somewhere. So if you want to find out what I think about the later films in this series, then do go check them out. I'll put a link down in the description for those videos. But yeah, Dracula, have you seen it? And if so, What did you think about it? Leave your comments down below. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.